I can say a few things about its application in teaching. And there again, it should have been obvious for a long time, and I think it has been obvious to whoever was or were the good teachers in the past. They realized full well that you cannot transfer knowledge from a teacher to a student as though it were a commodity that you can just transport from one head into another. They realized that in some sense the student always has to build his own knowledge or her own knowledge. And that is a very different process from the one that was assumed to be a reception of something that is ready-made into the head, which doesn't happen. And well, I think behaviorism had a lot to do with the retarding of those insights in education in general, because behaviorism is a very interesting method of teaching behaviors, but it doesn't teach thinking. Because in fact the behaviorist dogma excludes really anything that is mental or cognition of that kind. You see, the military is a perfect example. In the military you expect people to react to a command, and the reaction is a physical one. It's just like training a dog. You say sit and the dog has to sit down, and reinforcement works wonderfully there. If you give a dog a biscuit 5 times after he sat down, he'll sit down every time you say sit. Almost infallible. And you can teach students to repeat what they read in the textbook or what the teacher says, word perfect. And behaviorism is ideal for that. But that's not really what we want to teach our students. We want to teach them not only to know the phrases that are in the textbook, but also why they are there, what they are useful for, and what they imply, and when they are properly implemented and when not. So those things you only find out when you get to the meaning of the phrases and apply them in your own decisions of acting. Because then you begin to understand. And this is not to say that some teaching has to be sort of rote learning, where understanding is irrelevant. There are lots of things we have to learn by rote. The names of the months, the names of the days of the week, the number system. We have to learn the names of the numbers by rote. But what you do with them, it's no use if you learn an algorithm that teaches you how to multiply if you have never understood what multiplication really means. Some of the teaching literature of 50 years ago was all concerned with algorithms and with symbol management and whatnot.
And that didn't work?
What?
It didn't work after?
It didn't. There was the whole thing about new math that was a total flop. So, what constructivism has done in both mathematics teaching and science teaching is to find ways and means of getting the students actively to build their knowledge. And that, from an old-fashioned teacher's point of view, of course, is very risky, because you never quite know what the student is going to build in the situation that you present him or her with.
Anomalies are very refreshing sometimes.
The what?
Anomalies are very refreshing sometimes.
Yes. Well, there have been cases where teachers have learnt from the students, after all. And that is something that in the old-fashioned way of teaching was quite impossible, because the teacher was fully concerned and occupied by trying to get across what he was saying or she was saying. And there again, that is something that's been known for centuries, that if you show students a particular teaching situation, some of them will interpret it in ways that are totally unexpected to the teacher. And they're not what the teacher wants at all. On the other hand, we found in what was really arithmetic and not mathematics, but in the early grades of math education, that a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old sometimes comes up with an idea that is very original. It's totally unexpected from the traditional teacher's point of view, but it's an original idea. Mostly, it's the kind of idea that works in a very specific, limited context. And if you expand the context, that method doesn't work any longer. And that is the way you get the child who's had that idea to modify the method by showing the child that there are cases where it doesn't work. But the child has to find out that it doesn't work. There's no use telling him or her that it's wrong, because it isn't wrong. In that particular context, it's a perfectly viable way of setting about it. So there you are. Those are some of the constructivist ideas that are very basic and that bring about a basic change in the way certain matters are being taught. Others are quite well known. They've been known for a long time, but they fit into the constructivist method. For instance, that you break up a class into groups of 3 or 4 and let them work together and see what comes out. And afterwards they have to report on what they have done. Now that's very effective for one reason, because if they do that, they have to explain to their colleagues what they intend to do and what they are doing and how they think it could be solved, which all requires reflection. They can't just start fiddling with their fingers, as it were, and try to solve the problem. They have to think about it. And reflection is a crucial step in understanding a situation. So the fact that they have to talk to each other fosters reflection, and reflection fosters understanding. All those are very primitive ideas, and they have existed to some extent before, but constructivism gives a theoretical basis that shows why they should be useful and why they should be applied. And indeed, they have been quite successful in classes. But an interesting case was a student of ours who then went to a university in University of Purdue in Indiana, and he was fortunate there of finding a school where he could teach mathematics in his way, arithmetic, that is, for the first few grades. And he kept very good tags on the advances of the students and so on. And they discovered that after the first year of, in quote, constructivist sort of teaching, there was not much difference between the students of that class and the others. After the second year, they were decidedly better. After the third year, they were not only better in arithmetic, but they were better in all the other fields with which he had nothing to do whatsoever. Because they had learned to learn. And that's all. It's very simple. But they suddenly realized that learning was not a question of just listening and repeating. It was a question of reflecting about what you took in and applying it and using it yourself and doing it yourself. And if you do that in any branch, you learn more quickly than you did before.